My name is Roselle, and I'm a software engineer who also wants to start her own business one day. So I'm really excited to be moderating this panel. We're going to be discussing how to find, evaluate, and decide on a co-founder. So without further ado, let's get started. My first question is just asking all of the panelists to introduce themselves. Say your name, the name of the company you founded, and then how you ended up at your current company.
I can go first. I'm Raza Sheikh. I'm a managing director at Launchpad Venture Group. Launchpad is an angel group of 150 strong members, and we invest in early stage companies in the Boston and New England area. The way I ended up at Launchpad is because I'm an active angel investor, and that investing led me to join Launchpad. Before that, I started a company with my co-founders. So I have a little bit of experience of working with co-founders and building companies. And I'm very happy to join you guys and talk about this topic. Rakeem, you want to go next?
Yeah, do the R's first. My name is Rakeem Morris. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Surge. What we do is we have a more or less a CRM system for former employees, for hourly employees. You can imagine you're exiting hourly employee. What we do is we manage and automate this relationship with you as a former employee to get you to be rehired at your former employer, which you can imagine is quite relevant given all what's going on right now. And how I came about this business, I graduated from HBS and with my MBA in 2018. Got funded shortly after. That's where I met my co-founder as well. And we've been off and running since then.
Very good. Juan, followed by Nadine and Priyal.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Juan Macias. I'm CTO and co-founder of Sixpence. In Sixpence, we're trying to change the way people donate to social causes around them. Right now, we're very focused on churches. And the way we're going to do it is we want to engage people and try to motivate them to be more inclusive on financial participation. So we're having two ways of doing that with roundups and tidings on their income. And yeah, I'm very happy to be in this panel and share a lot of thoughts that I have on finding my co-founder.
Awesome, Nadine and Priya.
Hi, my name is Nadine Habayeb.
And I'm Priyal Bhartia.
We're the co-founders of Bohana. We make a popped water lily seed snack. We introduced this native Indian ingredient to the US in through delicious flavors.
Wow, all interesting companies. Very, very, very cool. My next question for everybody, or for Nadine, Priyal, and Raza, is at what stage did you decide you needed to find a co-founder? I imagine that, like, you know, you start your business, you're doing it on your own, or maybe early on you decide to. So super curious about that. And we can start with Nadine and Priyal and then go to Raza.
You know, you ask a question that I think is something like, which came first, the business or the co-founder? And in our case, it was the co-founder. So the business and the business idea came about from the two of us being friends first, and Priyal introducing this ingredient to me. And
it was just started off as a conversation. You know, we discovered this ingredient from India that I grew up eating. I showed it to Nadine, she got excited, and then it was like, wait, should we do this together?
And really that's where we decided to come together and start this and turn this, what is already a friendship, into a business partnership as well.
Love it.
I think the general answer is that it does happen and should happen as early as it can, because you're going on a journey. My colleague Sal Daher, who does a great podcast called Angel Invest Boston, he always says that a startup is a folly. And the first job of the founder is to convince others join that folly. So really, I think it is, as Nadine said, that it's like a chicken and egg. It does happen early enough and kind of should happen early enough. As soon as you think that you need one, we'll talk later. You need to have a coverage of certain skills and areas of expertise. And I think as soon as you embark on that journey, you will realize that you may or may not be able to do it alone. So the search for co-founder usually is early enough, and often it does happen. The co-founders come together first and the business comes later.
That's really, really interesting. I'm even curious now about like the brainstorming process of after you guys come together. But my next question is going to be for Rakim and Juan. And I'm curious, what resources did you use or were most helpful in finding a co-founder?
Yeah, the resources that I used, there were two main things. One worked out really well, one worked out not so well. I'll start out, well, I'll just tell them both and then you can probably figure out which one worked out really well. The first is I went to a co-founding pitch night. So I went on stage with a crowd of about 200 people and I pitched my idea. Then afterward, people either sent an email or text me or whatever that they were interested in my idea and wanted to possibly be a co-founder. That's the first way that I did it. That didn't work out so well. And then the other one that worked out really well was just hanging around spots that other entrepreneurs were hanging out as well. So I was a student at Harvard. They had the innovation lab. I more or less did everything there. You're not supposed to, I guess, but I would do my homework there and I would do some of my classwork there. And what you find is that you interact with a lot of people who are interested in business. You are interacting with people that want to start a company, and you create a lot of these connections and interactions with people that eventually evolve. So perhaps you're sitting in the kitchen with a coffee, and that conversation evolves to a friendship. And then after that, perhaps there's something that you can do together. But just hanging around spots that a lot of entrepreneurs hang out has helped me out tremendously. And that's one of the ways that perhaps it wasn't intentional finding a co-founder there, but it ended up being something that was extremely beneficial to me in the business.
Sure, just to continue the thought of Rahim. Yeah, any place where you can find entrepreneurs, you can find a co-founder. My story was a little bit like similar, not exactly a place where entrepreneurs where they hang out, but especially was in a party. I was just starting my master's degree in Boston. I was doing a master's in international business, and one of the first few weeks of starting the master's degree, the whole body of students did a welcoming party, and there I just was hanging out with some friends, and then just my co-founder appeared. He was like, "Hey, my dads are living in Colombia. They are doing a volunteering there. I'm from Colombia," so that's how we started talking about business and about all this cool entrepreneurship stuff. And I think the most important thing is to find something first, something in common, and pretty much the resources where you can find a co-founder is like anywhere you can meet people, chat with them, and feel really comfortable talking with potential co-founders.
Awesome. So my takeaway is you can find like co-founders anywhere. There can be like your best friend. They can be at a pitch night or even a college party. So that's really awesome. I have a follow-up question then, Juan. Do you prefer your co-founder to be someone who's a friend, a coworker that you've worked with before, or somebody completely new?
Yeah, I think the really important thing is to be comfortable with your co-founder, being able to share all your thoughts. There's going to be very, very tough moments in your business where you need to be talking about everything, about what you think about this situation or the other situation. But I really think the most important thing is to be able to be completely honest with each other, and it could be somebody that you just met at a party, or it could be a friend that you have been with a yeah with a relationship with them for a long time.
And building on that, I'll be brief with this. It can't be understated just how much time you're going to spend with your co-founder. It's not when you're only at work. It's the plane trips, the 5-hour, 6-hour plane trips to the Bay Area to raise money. It is the, perhaps you're even staying in the same hotel room because, again, you're out and you're pitching, you're raising money together. You spend so much time with this one other or many other people. You absolutely have to get along with that person on a friend level, or it will never work.
Good to know. Good to know. So somebody that I can be comfortable with, regardless of the situation. On that note, how many co-founders do you typically search for? Is there a certain amount that's like the perfect equation? Because I've seen companies with 3 co-founders and 2, and just curious. And this question is guided towards Raza and Juan.
I can go first. There are exceptions of every kind. There are very successful companies that are solo founders, and very, very successful ones with 20 co-founders. But data and a lot of, real practical experience shows that in brief, the number is 2 or 3. Not more than 3 and not less than 2. But again, having said that, there are exceptions in all cases. But the real important thing is, despite the number, that you need coverage for 4 areas among however many co-founders you have. Number 1 is sales. Number 2 is technical knowledge, whatever that means for your company. If it's deep technical knowledge of the product, of the science, of whatever it is. The third area is the deep market awareness. Somebody needs to know the market that you're going to be selling in. And the fourth area, which is often very underrated, is called product management skills. It can come in different words, but really those 4 areas is what the founding team ultimately needs to cover. And the short answer is 2 or 3.
Yeah, to follow up on that, I think it's this perfect formula, or what I have seen is 3 people, 3 co-founders joining together to have seen this the perfect formula. My co-founder and I were in the business area. He's on the business area and I'm more on the technical area. So I found it very easy to visualize like a pyramid. Like you always need a business guy, a technological guy, as Raza said, very knowledgeable about your industry and your market. And the third one is a design, a very creative, a very open-minded person that helps with a lot of marketing, shaping product, and stuff like that. I really think those 3 aspects are very important for a startup.
Awesome. Thank you. Those were very thorough answers and very good to know. I didn't even think about like having people who are covering certain areas and skills. Just to summarize for the listeners, we're looking for 2 to 3, 3 being one of the perfect numbers of co-founders, and having coverage for sales, technical knowledge, deep market awareness, and product management skills. I want to maybe highlight some of the questions that I see happening in the chat right now. John asked, is having co-founders first before the formulation of the startup product abnormal? Is it usually the other way around, idea first and then co-founding team next? Because it will minimize co-founding team member misfits. I feel like you guys can answer, but what I was getting from it before was you have the co-founders first and create the business. But if one of you guys wants to answer.
I think it's a very relative thing. Both of these things happen in a short amount of time. So sometimes it is possible that the co-founders came together and then formulated or bonded together on an idea. And it's also possible that the idea came to one founder and they found a co-founder and sold the idea to them. But both of these things are happening in a relatively small amount of time in the big picture sense. It can work either way. Ultimately, you still need to figure out if the founding team is the right team for moving forward. But I think in the beginning, the order could kind of come in any order.
Cool. Thank you. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat now. But I'm going to move on to one of the other planned questions for Raza and Rakim. So what qualities were you looking for in a co-founder, and how is it different than recruiting or sourcing a early employee?
Well, the number one thing I would say is that you have to look that your co-founder has fully bought onto the mission, vision, problem that you're going to solve. Like that's, I think, number one. But really neck and neck with that, almost number one, is that you know that you'll be able to work together and be able to deal with problems, issues, as Rakim was earlier saying. And number three, I think you have to make sure that those four areas are covered. That's how you would evaluate co-founder candidates and possibilities. If you're both engineers or all three of you are engineers, but you're awesome and you work together well and you're also bought on the mission, it still may not work as well. And lastly, whichever co-founder you're looking for, I think you're looking for competence for that area that you hope that co-founder would cover.
Yeah. So I completely agree with everything that Raza said. Some things I'll add to that. The first is understanding the values that your potential co-founder has. It's always funny to me if you read sort of like these dating articles and the co-founding articles, they're pretty much the same. You're looking for somebody that has very strong principles as a person, that has very strong values, because this is someone that you need to rely on. This is somebody that more or less you're splitting the quality of your personal livelihood with. Because if you're going to business with this person and you are relying on your business for your income and hopefully and eventually for the livelihoods of all your employees, you want to make sure that you're joining with someone that has very strong principles and very strong values, and you align with those values and principles. And with that foundation, you can create whatever and whichever company that you want. So that's the first. And the second is, and this is what Raza said too, and I'll just say it in a slightly different way. With the business, it's figuring out this big puzzle, and and you want all the pieces to be complementary as much as you possibly can. So my co-founder is more of an operational, more attention to detail type person. I can have attention to detail. It's not my preference. I'm more of a big picture vision type of guy. I'm also more technical as well. I've done some technical roles in the past and he hasn't. And those two things, we were able to sort of, this picture, this puzzle of a business, we fit the parts fairly well, fairly complementary, and that all comes together to create a business.
Awesome. Sounds like you need to look for someone who's like complementing your skill set. And that actually, I think, transitions pretty well into the next question about like, to Nadine and Priyal, like what roles did you expect your co-founder to play? And like, how did you divvy up the task when you first started? And then how have those roles evolved today?
Yeah, so like everyone's mentioning in the last question, we knew from the start sort of what role we would play. And it was part of the reason why we knew we could do this and we could do it really well, because we had already identified with what role we could play in growing this business and how we could complement each other's skill sets. My background in marketing in sales in the US market was what we needed to bring, a foreign ingredient to the US. And
I had skills in, like Raza mentioned, like the technical knowledge, which was all of the supply chain with sourcing the ingredient and then bringing it to the market in the US.
And so we actually talked through all of these things, and to Raza's, 4 points, like we very early on said, okay, I know I can handle this, you can handle this. What are we missing? And actually, do we need somebody else here? And we did think about, early on, should we find someone that can handle this part or this part? We actually ended up being able to very clearly define the roles that each of us are responsible for, putting that in writing, actually, which was something that was really, really great for us to do in the beginning. It was just to clarify those details, to make sure that we, while it was the honeymoon phase of our relationship, could make sure that we defined all of the sort of times where it would get tougher. And at those times, there were also crossover responsibilities that we both knew we could do and needed to do together that we did as well. So.
Awesome. Thank you. That was very interesting. Even writing it down just to make sure that, you have those roles like written down and like, what you're doing. I think that's a really, really great tip. There is a question in the panel in the chat that I think actually is going to get answered pretty soon. So I'm just going to put that to the side, John. But your question will be answered soon. My next question for Raza, Nadine, and Priyal is like I hear everyone keep talking about like making sure your motives and your mission aligns, but how did you determine that your co-founder had aligned missions with you? We can start with Raza.
I think as a founder, or when the founding team is coming, that skill of finding and hiring the right people, including co-founders, is one of the most important skills for anybody. I think finding alignment in both values and motivation is kind of super critical. Motivation you can judge by, working together on some things, and I think that's part of the reason we didn't talk about it as much, that typically the co-founder dating and that short-term I'll meet somebody at the bar hookup part doesn't work as well for co-founders, is because you haven't worked together enough. And work could mean you were in school together, or you were co-workers at a company, or you otherwise knew and have worked on certain things before. It does take some time for you to realize, understand, and convince yourself that your motivations are aligned. You're both in it to make money, or you're both in it to really help humanity with education, or whatever it is. The value alignment is a little tougher than judging motivation. Motivation kind of comes across a little easier. That does require you to travel together and know, if the other person is treating the waiter rudely, then you kind of know that you don't have the same values. You do get hints and glimpses of that. As with dating, you can kind of fall in love and say, wow, this co-founder looks really great for me. But I think you have to pay attention to those small things to really make that judgment call. In the end, it's a judgment call that you have to make, whether your motivations and your values are aligned.
Good answer. Sorry, I was on mute. That's a great answer. I'm curious, what about you guys, Nadine and Priyal?
So for us, we actually, when we started the idea and ideation process of building this company, we together found what the mission and the vision was. And from the start, we were quite aligned on what we wanted to create and what we wanted to put out in the world. And so one of the first conversations we had was, what is it that we want to create, and why would it be special and different? So that was a conversation that we had just from the get-go before we even came up with the brand.
And we used a lot of very formal processes. We went through the exercises that are often used in big corporate team building exercises, because we of course had hours and hours of casual conversation, but we also did it in a bit of a formal process, and that's really helpful because that gets you to really deep dive and get to that why, which we always talk about in startups, and that getting to that and making sure that's really clear from the beginning is really important.
Awesome.
So it's okay to formalize it and to do all that really formal exercises and things, even if you're two people in a business that's starting in your garage, it's just as important.
Yeah. I like that advice to maybe formalize it and make sure you guys are on the same train of thought. I see a common question that keeps popping up in the chat, and it's about equity. So I'm going to just go ahead and ask that. So the questions are ranging from like, how do you come to agreement about how to split equity, and then there's also like questions around like, if you already spent a significant amount of time developing the business as an original co-founder, how do you then determine equity for your new co-founder? So anyone who's interested in answering, feel free.
Jump in here, because I've done it both ways, where in the beginning, you say, okay, this person gets 20%, this person gets 30%, this person gets 50%. What you find out is that if someone has locked in, at least for me, this is my personal experience, if you've locked in that equity in the beginning, you can't really forecast how much energy and how much value someone's going to create for your business. And what we did the second time around, we follow a methodology somewhat loosely, but mostly follow a methodology called slicing pie. They have a website you can go to. More or less what it says, how the equity splitting works is based on how many hours you put into the startup. You take how many hours you put into the startup. So there is a little bit of a time tracking element to it, but you can, if you sort of, by and large, if you just estimate, oh, I spent 10 hours on Sunday, it's actually not too difficult, not onerous at all. Anyways, your equity is based on how many hours that you're putting into the startup relative to the rest of your co-founders. There are some things in this methodology that sort of influence how much you have in terms of equity, based on your personal experience level and your opportunity cost. But it is a formula that or a methodology that we use that has been very successful. There has been no arguments about equity percentages on the team because it's a fairly transparent process.
Transparency is key. Anyone else want to add to that?
I'll add to that, that generally, dividing up equity is a function of the effort or sweat, as Rakeem was mentioning, the stage that you're joining. It's possible that a co-founder joins maybe 6 months or even a year later. So people who started earlier joined at a different stage. And the third factor in that, which doesn't happen often, but can happen, who's bringing how much cash from their own pocket into the company. So in a super ideal situation, if everybody's spending equal time, joined at the same time, and brought equal amount of cash, then obviously everything should be split equally. The general principle here is fairness and equity. And based on these three dimensions of work, founders do figure out, who owns what. Generally, at this stage, at the early stage, it still is broad stroke. It's usually multiple of 10 or 5 or 20, and not necessarily, 12.37 and so on. But as we'll talk about co-founder agreements, you do need a way of talking about it, and you do need a way of figuring that out as you go. And lastly, you do need to put founder vesting for everybody. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later as well.
Oh, good to know. Good to know. I didn't even think about how much like the people are putting in, like how much money they're putting in should kind of balance out and be fair. Another common question I'm seeing, which is actually a question I also have, is like, what if you choose the wrong co-founder? Because like it sounds like you guys, and you're like, you know, you meet them at a college party or something like that. Like, what if you choose the wrong one? You find out they're like really not for you. You guys have a falling out and break up. What made you realize that you chose the wrong person, and like what were the consequences of those mistakes? Raza chose to answer that question, but also if anyone else wants to afterwards, I'm curious.
Well, the short answer is that you're screwed, but you know, really, just like any relationship, it can have real consequences. People don't realize this, that co-founder conflict or the founding team not working well actually is a really common reason for companies to fail, apart from market or not picking the right problem or all the other things people learn. So it is fairly important. The real thing is, once you have a conflict and a falling out, how do you recover from that? That's one of the reasons why you need to have founder vesting for all founders. So if on day one, you all decided to have 1/3 of the company, and on day number 10, one of the co-founders just simply leaves, do they just already own 1/3 and don't have to do any work from here on ever? No, so, you know, there is vesting for that. So there's a clawback for their stocks to be coming back into the company so that you can get another co-founder and hopefully recover from that. Yeah, I'll let others, if anybody actually has experience of falling out with co-founders, to talk about what happened.
Yeah, and I have one more kind of question to add with this topic. I think Franco asked, like, how do you set up exit clauses? Is that the same thing as like setting up vesting? I'm not really familiar with any.
It sounds similar.
Okay.
But the concept of vesting, it's a misnomer for stock, for common stock that people already own. It's technically a right for the company to buy back or bring back the shares into the company. There are basically restrictions on the stock. Not to get too technical into it, but it works very similar to vesting as people understand for stock options. And the idea is that if you leave before you're vested, then that portion of the unvested equity or common stock comes back into the company equally.
Gotcha. Anyone else on the breakups with co-founders topic?
I had a breakup with a co-founder, so I guess I started this business twice. So my first co-founder I met at that co-founder pitch night. I got some resumes and I looked at his resume and it said, well, I went to this top 4 CS school. I graduated top 10% of my class. I thought, well, if I almost cursed, if I have this person on my team, it'll be a piece of cake to raise money. He was very well pedigreed. It was a picturesque sort of resume. And so I didn't think about it at all. Like literally he sent me the email. We were co-founders 10 days later. We worked in this business during my first year, getting my MBA, and spent my summer on it, you know, emailed a little bit of my savings, not a lot at all. But, you know, I didn't take internship I could have otherwise had. So there's a big opportunity cost as well. Long story short, I decided to fire the 4th person on my team. My co-founder disagreed, and he took everything with him as a technical co-founder. So imagine working on something for a whole year and you have nothing to show for it. The second time around, finding a co-founder literally took me 9 months to find somebody that I was satisfied with on a friendship, personal level, that we share those same values and principles again. And then I repeated this with the first 4 or 5 employees of the company who are still with me today, 2 years later. That's my co-founder. And I mean, there's definitely more details, as you can imagine, with a story like that. But that's the high level. And yeah, just take your time. There's no rush, because this is going to take a long time to get off the ground. 10 years you're looking ahead at. So be careful with the decision that you make.
Good to know. I will be careful for whenever I.
Yeah, the hot guy at the bar doesn't mean it's a good option.
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Oh, another question is, like, what qualities or traits do investors look for in co-founders? I know Raza was a co-founder before, so I'm curious about his perspective, and then also Nadine and Priyal, I'm curious about your experience.
Well, I'll comment on it from an investor perspective. I'll put my investor hat on, and we hear pitches. Really, from an investment perspective, the number one thing that we're looking is, collectively, do we see coverage of those 4 areas: sales, deep technical knowledge, market awareness, and product management skills in the team, in the founding team. Number 2, we're looking for signs, hints, and otherwise evidence of that this team actually works together well. Or at least has shown in the prior. Believe it or not, we have actually seen co-founder, conflict right within the pitch moments, where one is cutting the other one off and saying, no, that's not how it works. And the number 3 thing, although it's actually also very important, is that we want to align that team. It's a great team. It appears they have coverage for the areas and they seem to work together, but are they the right team collectively for the problem that they're embarking on solving? So those 3 things are very important that investors look for when evaluating a team of co-founders. And Hakeem, just for your comfort, the pedigree thing doesn't play well with investors. Actually, it usually plays the opposite.
I did it all wrong. But that's good to know.
I agree with Raza on all of the points that he said. And I would add to that I think both co-founders have to be equally passionate about the business and have to be passionate throughout working together, because, there are ups and downs and there'll be moments where it's stagnant or challenging. And I think the most important part for us was that we both were equally aligned, but also as gung-ho to make it a success and continue working for it.
Yeah, and making it really clear to those investors. I mean, we are together now in person, which is a treat, but we're actually long distance co-founders. And that's because our business is a global business. And we show that Priyal is the expert in our supply chains, in our farm, in our entire backwardly integrated process. And I am in the US, in our market, in our stores. And so it sometimes is, especially now in this new world where this remote business is working quite well, we've had that sort of built into our foundation from the beginning. So we have always been able to be this global partnership and get lucky moments like this where we can be together. But we prove that in already the way our business is built. And I think investors can clearly see that.
Awesome. So showing that you work together well, you're equally passionate wherever you are across the globe, sounds like the consensus here. I feel like I haven't asked Juan a lot of questions, so I just want to circle back to him. There's a question about, like, what do you do when you feel it's not working out? I feel like it's kind of a vague question, so you can touch on whether it's the co-founder partnership similar to Rakeem, or maybe just the business itself, maybe even like pivoting with your co-founder.
Yeah, sure. What I wanted to touch on this question is that touching back with what I said on on being completely honest with your co-founder. There is some people say that being a co-founder is being like in a marriage. I think a lot of people have heard of that. And if you're not completely honest, or you're having some problems and you're starting to store that problems inside you, and you're not reflecting that as soon as possible, there's always going to be a huge moment where you're going to explode, or you're going to show you're not comfortable in different situations. So if something just goes wrong, just being completely honest and talking about your problems, it's just like when relationships are in a tough moment, just going to a therapist and talking about your problems, about what you're feeling, why is that affecting you so much, and sorry, and being just going to in a point of the conversation, just talking about, will you be able to make it happen? Will you both are going to have some compromises, and just talking and saying that, are you going to really make it work? How are you guys are gonna make it work? How are you gonna improve and make the relationship stronger, and being more efficient on different fronts on the problems you guys are having?
I like that. What I'm getting from it is like, it's important to express your feelings, even as a founder. One question for Raza. What do you think about co-founder agreements and founder vesting from the start? I think you touched on this a little bit, but I think you can expand a little bit.
I would say founder agreements are fairly important. As you come together, it becomes a way of formalizing that relationship by talking about it, by putting it in writing. I want to plug on September 23rd, 8:45 a.m. There's actually a much more detailed session on founder vesting right here on Startup Week Boston. So please check it out if you're more interested in learning about this. But a co-founder agreement or founder agreement talks about how equity is divided up, puts a founder vesting schedule for everybody, who generally does what, who is going to be on the board of the company and who is not. And there's one founder that is special, and that's the CEO. So who is going to be the CEO? And how the conflict resolution or problem solving will happen, and what are the mechanisms for the founders to resolve that. It can come in many varieties and details. As I mentioned, the vesting part is just to protect you and everybody and the company against somebody just walking away and not doing the work to get their stock, remaining stock back into the company. But co-founder agreements are a really good idea in the early stage. They don't have to be super formal or super legal, but provides you with a platform, a way of working through those things that co-founders need to work through.
Awesome. I'm excited to tune in to hear more about this other panel. And I'm also curious about like how you choose a CEO. But those are all the questions I've had. So I'm gonna look through Slido in the Zoom webinar chat and try to pick out any questions. I think we just recently got one from John. It says, I am talking to a potential co-founder. I have worked with him before in a couple of projects. We worked well. He's a principal software engineer at a huge farm company. I'm seeking investment. The potential co-founder said he won't quit his day job until I found investment first. Is that a hint that my friend hasn't bought into his idea, or doesn't feel financial security? Should he walk away from that person? Good question.
I mean, on one end, everybody tells people don't quit your day job until you really have something, and you can completely understand that point of view. But it does give a little bit of a hint of possibly not being convinced of the idea. That's not necessary, but at least to say that they're not convinced enough to quit their job and have no income. Everybody's circumstances are different, so you can't really judge people strictly based on that. Maybe there are, a medium ground where they work nights and weekends or something to that effect, and that's a way of judging that alignment. But I think each situation varies, and you have to make that judgment yourself. But it is a good test.
Anyone else want to add on it? Or if not, I'll ask another question. Okay. I think it was pretty thorough. Oh, there's still more questions about finding co-founders, and I have these questions as well. So one person is like basically explaining that they're not in college or this post-grad stage of life and not hanging out in these communities. So how can they find a co-founder? And then another person brought up a good point. Like, we're in this COVID-19 environment of social distancing, so we can't find a co-founder at a bar or like a college party or in school. So we're curious what advice you guys have there.
Well, the first thing I'll say, just going back to that, although it is very popular and there is always a good chance or some chance of finding a good co-founder at these speed dating events. But really, we know from a lot of experience, just like finding a mate, it's typically who you went to high school with or college with or coworker. That's like 4 out of 5 marriages. Similar to that. So first thing I think you all have to know is you have a network. You shouldn't think like, well, I don't know anybody. I think basically that you have to go through who you went to school with, who have you worked in the past, to kind of have candidates for potential co-founders. And you never know until you ask them. You may think, well,